Hello and welcome. So this is Jane Deacon. If you'd like to quickly introduce yourself and then I will introduce myself.
Okay, good. So, yeah, hello there. I'm Jane Deacon. I'm actually a polarity therapist and shamanic healer. I've been working with clients since the year 2000, and I've been doing all sorts of things during that time. But I essentially work with the energy body, so the energy that underlies the physical, the mind, the emotions, etc. And I also work with ancestral stuff as well. So I've been working with people online and in person for, well, 26 years now. That seems a long, long time. I've also been through my own healing journey with Hashimoto's. So one of the reasons why Sarah and I got together was because we wanted to share our stories, and there are lots of similarities. But essentially, I live in the New Forest. I have a little doggy. I love to walk along the beach and in the forest. I love nature. Obviously, that's the reason why I do what I do, because everything is about nature and connecting with the elements, etc., for healing. But yeah, that's essentially me. I work with people online and in person, and I run classes and workshops, and I write a lot. So I write a lot of blogs, etc. But yeah, how about you, Sarah?
Oh, thanks, Jane. That was a great introduction. Yes, so my name is Sarah Brooks and I'm a functional nutritional therapist. And so I help women with Hashimoto's to get their life and body back with nutrition, lifestyle, and environmental medicine. And I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's while I was studying. It was actually my studies that helped me get diagnosed, which was amazing. And then I used everything that I knew to help myself heal and rebalance my body. But at the time, I was also really interested in using other alternative therapies, which really helped me to speed up my healing. So for example, homeopathy, herbs, acupuncture. And I was always very passionate about nutrition and I felt that it was the foundation of things. But as my practice has grown and developed, I've really realized that, well, really, that emotions and, trauma and stress and, nervous system dysregulation tends to come first. And so while I'm very passionate about nutrition, and it can help rebalance the body and even the mind, but what I realized is that really what sits above that and why some people don't make progress is because the emotional piece is sitting above that. And so the emotions impact the mind and then the mind impacts the body. So really nutrition and lifestyle can do so much, and it really can help rebalance the body, but it can also only do so much. And so I've realized that there's this other component. And so I met Jane online and we really connected. And I'm really interested and fascinated in what she does. And I would love to start bringing this, I find a lot of therapies are sort of integrating now. So I'd love to bring this piece in. And I brought Jane on today because we connected, we both have Hashimoto's, and we've spoken about the emotional component, and we've actually found a lot of similarities in our story. So what I wanted to do was to connect with Jane today and for us to share our stories with you all, because we found similarities and therefore you might find some similarities as well. So I thought it would be a really inspiring, interesting and insightful piece, and just something really nice to share with you all. So we're going to share our stories, and we're going to start with Jane. Um, yeah, so Jane, do you want to go ahead and
Yeah,
then?
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure. So, what I've done is I've kind of summarized some key emotional patterns that have been a common theme through both of our stories. So, my story is very long, so I don't want to sit here for hours and hours telling you all about my story. So, I've kind of summarized it. So, one of the key things about an autoimmune condition, or the creation of an autoimmune condition, is feeling emotional unsafety. And I can totally relate to that in my own journey because when I was a young child, I was emotionally very fragile. I was very shy. I was so shy. I used to hide behind my mum or dad's legs when anybody else was coming, was talking to us. So I was really chronically shy. But with that, I also, and I'm not bashing my parents here at all because we've all had our journey, we've had a healing time in our lives. And so this is not about blaming anybody else, but my setup, my environment, if you like, was based on the fact that I didn't feel safe. And that was because my mum, bless her, she had manic depression. So her moods were unpredictable. My father was quite domineering, but he was my strength. But in that, I never knew from one day to another what it was going to be like. So I felt on tenterhooks. So that's one of the key things about autoimmunity is living with emotional unsafety. And in that, there's like this core imprint that is about I'm not safe being who I am. That's the kind of feeling. And that feeling of safety is one of the core things that we need in order to grow and develop, feeling confident in life. So that was kind of the first thing. Did you have that as well, Sarah?
Yeah, so yeah, it's just really interesting that you brought that up because I was very similar. I was painfully shy.
Mm.
And for me, this emotional unsafety, it started for me at home growing up. I was a bit like you. I had quite a domineering, controlling father, always telling me off, always trying to control me or criticize me. And so I didn't feel safe at home to be truly myself. I wasn't allowed to express myself or my own opinion. I wasn't allowed to have my own thoughts and I wasn't allowed to talk back in any way, to the point where actually as a young adult I realized I didn't even have an opinion on anything. And I actually had to work really hard to actually develop an opinion, to the point where I even set up a blog because I just realized that everyone had opinions around me at university and I didn't. And so I set up a blog to start forcing myself to have an opinion, also in my first job as well. And my lack of confidence caused me to not feel safe to be myself at school either. So I became like this chronic people pleaser in order to build relationships and get by and to survive. And then, sorry, there's lots, but later on in life, in my career, I was bullied, which again caused me to then not feel safe, like in the workplace or socially. And I developed social anxiety. So this lack of confidence and anxiety, it led me to losing multiple jobs, which then meant I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe in the workplace. I had left home by this point, so I'd left home. I'd left home from not feeling safe in the home, so I felt more safe when I was at home as an adult. But I then moved into not feeling safe at work. So we can probably talk a bit more about it later. But yeah, I sort of look back now and think I spent so many years feeling unsafe in one way or another. So yeah, it
Yeah.
was a big thing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you led nicely into the next one actually, which is all about a suppression of our authentic identity, which comes from being dominated or overly shaped by others. We actually were just talking before this, weren't we? Being, listening to other people rather than listening to your own voice inside. And in that, it's about, loss or suppression of your authentic identity. And I can totally relate to that because because I was shy, didn't have the confidence. I mean, this pattern is mirrored between us. It's so interesting. And my dad was very domineering as well. So if he said jump, I would say how high. I didn't actually have any filter. I would trust him totally because I saw him as the person that would lead, that is my safety really. But that meant I wasn't able to or develop my own expression, my own identity. And that left my root, that feeling of real kind of, yes, I know who I am. It wasn't there. So what that the core imprint of that aspect, that kind of suppression of identity, was a feeling of yourself is not acceptable. You are not acceptable as who you are because it's everybody else that is better than you. You know, everybody else is better than you. So that's what my kind of younger life was like, really. Um, and the autoimmune disease, as we know, reflects that inner conflict. You know, there's a conflict going on inside where the body no longer recognizes where it belongs or who it belongs to. And that's exactly how I felt when I was growing up. Well, for a long time, really, not just when I was younger, but also into my 20s and mid 30s even. So, so that's kind of where it sat with me in my story. And I guess the next phase of my life started when I was 15, when I suffered a really devastating trauma. It was awful. And again, it's because I wasn't able to discern what was good and what was not good in other people. I basically got attacked. So and at the time, I remember when I was going through it, I didn't know whether this is right. What should I be doing? There was so much conflict going on, and it was totally wrong what happened. So that left me with this internalized shame, and this trauma I kept to myself for years. Nobody knew about it, okay, except for my sister. She knew about it, but she didn't. I swore her to secrecy. So this kind of feeling then from 15, you know, that's a kind of a really important time in the girl's life, well, any life really, when you're developing your hormones. And here we go, the hormones are coming in now, you know. This unprocessed trauma really led to a lot of problems in my life physically. I started to manifest physical stuff. So I had a PTSD response in my from 15 all the way to through to my 30s. I was still in post-traumatic stress. Um, and this whole feeling during that traumatic time was an imprint of I must carry this alone. So there we start to feel that level of responsibility you have in life. You start to take on responsibility that really you shouldn't need to take on because I felt I couldn't share this. You know, I was so shamed I couldn't share this. So I must carry this alone. So there started the pattern in me to take on more responsibility than I really needed to. And of course, I didn't metabolize the emotions. I didn't know how to. My parents were at their wits' end. They took me to the doctors. The doctors put me on antidepressants at 15. You know, I was only on them for 6 months, but I was put on antidepressants. Oh my goodness. And because I didn't tell them what had happened, and they didn't understand. I had headaches. I had this pressure in my head. I couldn't sleep very well. I was very tearful. And I went off the rails a bit, you know. I was a teenager and went off the rails a bit. So I guess, Sarah, you may also had some trauma in your life as well.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm so sorry to hear about some of the things that happened to you. And
Oh, thank you.
yeah, I mean, I experienced the same imprint, but not to the same extreme. So I think what's interesting though is that I was dominated by my father, as we said, but
Mm,
I didn't feel safe and I didn't trust him. I didn't like him.
mm,
So I was always tiptoeing around on eggshells. You know, this is again my people pleasing, keeping the peace.
mm,
And I just adapted into this survival mode rather than expressing my truth. So I don't tick all of the everything in this box, but I was being dominated and overly shaped by others,
yeah.
um, and I adapted to survive rather than expressing my own truth. And I was also living to meet expectations instead of my inner needs.
Mm,
So I went under the radar at school. I almost tried to remain invisible,
yeah.
and that was my way of feeling safe. By
Mm,
not being seen or heard, I felt safe. And that's where I felt at peace because I didn't want to be bothered because I was always being told off,
mm,
controlled. You know, everything was just, I felt suppressed all the time. So when I went to school, that was my escape. I went under the radar, I wasn't noticed,
mm,
because I didn't want to be bothered by anyone. I had friends, but I now look back and realise that I was even slightly invisible to them because I didn't really build very good, strong connections. And I thought I was friends with them, but as I grew up, like they sort of had no reason to stay in touch with me or connect with me. Like never really felt like they were really my friend, but I thought they were my friend.
Yeah.
So I grew up and I've looked back and I've realised how invisible I was. So yeah, that's kind of and I think it's good to sort of also share in a way that there can be different extremes on this, and you might think, anyone watching might look back and think, oh, how does this work? It can work in different ways and to different extremes, and mine wasn't as extreme as Jane's, but it was equally, not equally actually, but it was still very hard and stressful for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just
That's so interesting because I can relate to the friends thing. I mean, I didn't like school. I just didn't like school. It wasn't my thing. So and again, I didn't actually create strong bonds with friends. There were friends, but they weren't. There was probably one girl who had actually. It's interesting. This is part of the pattern as well. She came into the school late, so she started like a year or two into the school that we'd started, and she was really vulnerable. And I took her under my wing. I didn't realize it at the time, but I really resonated with her and where she was. She'd come from, her mother was very similar to my mother, so mentally ill.
mm,
So I totally resonated with her. And because she had an accent, she came from the Midlands. I instantly kind of wanted to put my arm around her. So we became really close friends, actually. We were like navigating the world from a very distorted point of view, and not feeling safe, emotionally, it was just a kindred souls in a way. But everybody else, although I didn't have any problems with my friends, my sister bullied me. So I was bullied a lot by my sister.
mm,
So there was a lot of suppression going on there. So I had like lots of things going on. But again, I would rather laugh with the group rather than stand up and speak of how I was feeling because I didn't really know how I was feeling. So I'd go with the flow a lot. And to fit in, it's almost like I needed to fit in because I didn't know who I was. So
mm,
whereas you hid under the surface and became invisible, I kind of just fitted in. But I don't have any school friends now. People say to me, when you're at school, you have friends for life. It never happened for me because I went off and did loads of other things. But I felt I was on the outside of the group, never in the group, if that makes sense. So that's what it was like for me. But all of this stuff led to kind of relentless self-criticism and never feeling good enough programming actually. And I was always seeking approval. And I was also, and I still am today, a bit of a perfectionist. So that's one of the things that I have realized who I am. And one thing I always remember as I was growing up, I don't do it now, thankfully, is I would push beyond my limits. I would push and push and push because I wanted the approval and I wanted to be perfect. So my self-worth was tied into performance. So that's where my self-worth was. And it was almost that imprint of I must prove my worth to survive. So it was all around that. And I was quite competitive. I used to swim and all of that. Um, and this reflects in the immune system because there is this hostility, there's this attack rather than protection. And that was kind of that phase in my life where that was all developed, I believe. Yeah, so do you find yourself criticizing yourself?
mm. Yeah, I do. I just want to say I also was on the outside of the group, fitting in.
Yeah.
Um, I had one or two friends that I'm still friends with. Well, one, yeah, but yeah, not those close ties that other. I look back and I just think, God, everyone else has got such
Mm.
tight, strong bonds with the children that they met at school, and I don't. I don't.
Yeah.
But I'm also the same as you. My performance was very much tied to my self-worth. So part of me was like, I need to get away from my home life, and so this sense of responsibility. I have to do well at school because I have to go to university, which means then I can get a good job and I can survive on my own without needing my family. So I was always working very hard at school, always trying to get good grades. And because I also went to school to seek approval because I wasn't getting approval at home, I was always sort of needing praise or something like that. Although because I was always under the radar, I wasn't really noticed at school. Teachers weren't that bothered about me because I was just in the middle. I wasn't high, I wasn't low. I just sort of, but I was fine with it to a certain extent because it kept me under the radar. But it was very important for me to move on and do well. And then getting good grades was a way of me getting some. That was my way of saying you're good enough.
Mm,
You're good because I wasn't getting praise from anywhere else. So I really was attached to my grades, and that I was attached to my self worth.
mm.
Um,
Interesting.
so yes, so I became a perfectionist as well,
Yeah,
and always pushing beyond the limits,
yeah,
particularly when I went through my period of sort of losing lots of jobs. And that really was that horrible vicious cycle of losing self-confidence and losing self-worth, but then pushing to survive, to
mm,
get myself another job,
yeah,
to reprove myself to the next place.
yeah.
But I had this underlying lack of self-worth, lack of confidence,
Mm,
anxiety, and then I just couldn't perform in that job either.
mm,
And it was just this horrible downward cycle until I pretty much hit rock bottom,
mm,
felt like a big, horrible heap of a mess on the floor, and felt like I cannot go on.
mm,
Because I worked in advertising and I went through every department. I was in project management, then I went to management. I was always needing a new start and a new beginning.
mm,
And then I tried to be a strategist, did a master's and constantly just trying to make it and
mm,
get some kind of approval and self-worth. And I didn't even make it there. So then I was just this heap of a mess. And I was like, I need to completely step out of this industry
mm,
and start again and do something completely different and rebuild my confidence,
mm,
my self-worth.
mm,
Yeah, and
yeah.
to be honest, it didn't really happen until I studied nutrition. So I did work in a school, um, and it wasn't until I started nutrition I then could rebuild my
Mm,
identity, which I
yeah,
think we'll talk about at some point. So
yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, I can relate to the overgiving and, boundaries are collapsed because again, you're overgiving because you want the approval and you're always prioritizing others at the expense of yourself. That's classic other person centered, isn't it? And you ignore your physical and emotional needs, which is a big thing too. And that leads to that feeling of being responsible for others' well-being. And that's one thing that I have to check with myself now because I'm always thinking about my husband and everybody else, before me. But I consciously know that. So I do really work on prioritizing myself first now. But that kind of self-abandonment, really. That's the feeling. And I guess I could relate to that because I didn't tell anybody about the trauma for 15 years. So the trigger for me was I got divorced. I got married and divorced in my 20s because I should never have got married in the first place. My ex-husband was ex-military. I was in the military then, but he went off to a war zone, and it just heightened everything for me. So we kind of didn't make it. So by the age of 30, I'd reached rock bottom too, and I didn't want to be here anymore. But interestingly enough, I had physical symptoms. I had back pain, knee pain, aches, and I had headaches. I had so many physical symptoms, and I had no idea why because I was really fit. So, I excelled at sports. I excelled in every job that I had. I would do really, really well. And then I get to a point where I think, oh, I've got to leave. I'm bored. I've got to leave. So that was my pattern, right? So I would leave just before things were getting really good and I think I've had enough now, I'll go. And I never had a problem getting a job because I'd always apply myself. I would overgive. And it was that overgiving and that over a sense of responsibility that kind of burnt me out in a way. And that would be my trigger. That would be the thing that I think actually I need to move to something different because I need something else to give me that kind of energy that I needed. When you start a new job, it's all adrenaline, isn't it? It's all like learning. So I was in that pattern. But
Mm.
when I was 30, I decided to go to the doctors and present him with all these symptoms. And he was very wise because he just, I said to him, I've got backache, my tummy's bloated. I didn't realize at the time, but I had IBS. My tummy's bloated. My periods are like this. Da, 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 da. And he said, tell me what's really going on. And it was that moment in time when I actually, for the first time, told someone else what had happened to me when I was 15. And it was like a portal opening, if you like. And he said, right, let's get you some help. So he sent me off to a specialist trauma counselor. And I was with this guy for a year. And actually, he wrote, funny enough, he asked me because he wrote a study on me, weirdly enough, which is really weird, for something he was doing. And he asked permission. I said, yes, that's fine, because I didn't really care at that time. Um, and that was the start, really, of me being able to speak. Even though I was still shy, I still didn't find it easy to speak out, but it was about myself, but it was an opportunity. And that was the start really for me when I was 30. So, but this is all about really overstepping the boundaries within ourselves, self-abandoning our needs, really. That's what it was like. And and of course, when you have this prolonged grief, so when you've had traumas, we know when you've had it's grief, you're grieving, you haven't properly processed the feelings and the thoughts, you're stuck in that moment in time. Um, you you go into intense caregiving as well, and of course that happened later on. I'll talk about my losing my parents later on, but during that period in my life, it was almost like I was starting afresh. It's almost like the previous 30 years were like, who was I? I don't know who I was. So at 30, things started to change for me. And I went through my 30s really on a self-discovery path. I was so wrapped up in, I'd go from one job to another. I do really well. I've done loads of things, but I wasn't happy, and I traveled a lot. So I would escape. My default was to escape, and that's the fight or flight thing. It's like, I'm not feeling safe. I've got to go and experience something to make me feel something. So I traveled a lot as well. So I just pack my bags and go somewhere, backpacking or something. And I did a lot of travel during that time. And then it was only later on in my late 30s when I suddenly thought, oh, what's life all about? What am I doing with my life? And then I went down the path of rediscovering a new career, which was I let go of everything. This is classic. I basically let go of everything. I sold a house. I sold my all my belongings to retrain. And I went and lodged with my friend and I went and retrained as a therapist. So I started massage therapy, anatomy and physiology, pathology, all of that. And then I found polarity therapy. And that was the real start of my healing journey. So
Mhm.
yeah, so whereas, yours was nutrition, mine was more body centered focused and emotional mind centered focus. So interesting, isn't it? But one thing I did discover, I had IBS and I also had polycystic ovary syndrome. So, and I dealt with that because the medical profession were awful, I must say. They told me I'd never have children, right to they said, you'll never have children. And I said, what can I do about it? There's nothing you can do about it. And they sent me off. And I went then and researched because that's that inner drive that I had to, no, this can't be right, and then I went on and did just sorted my diet out basically. So I went to a nutritional therapist. They got me back on track. The symptoms went, and that was when I was able to delve into the deeper healing side of things through polarity therapy. So yes, it's all coming together now.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's really interesting as well because I just it's crazy how similar but different our stories are.
yeah,
Um, because I also like to travel. So when I first experienced redundancy in 2007, when there was the big crash, And I was like, and I'd seen that my friend had been to Japan the year before, and I'd been seeing her photos, and I thought it looked amazing. And the minute I was made redundant, I was like, right, that's it. I'm going to Japan. Like, that's it. I was just, I needed to escape. I needed to get away from that stress response. So I went away for a year, and sometimes I would take 6 months off here or 6 months off there, because I would say to myself, I need to heal. I would always say to myself, I need to heal. Like, I felt like I needed some recovery time. Um, so I went to Japan for the year. Um, yeah. So, but what I want to also pick up on is about like my little story around, when I hit rock bottom, which was also at the beginning of my 30s. I started studying nutrition. That led me to the diagnosis of Hashimoto's. And that was the moment where I was like, I want to heal, because I was seeing a lot of people um, doing that in the mainstream. So I was really determined. I was like, I want to turn this around. This is not going to be my identity. I want to reverse it. It became my mission, my purpose. Um, and that's when I started trying other things as well. So I didn't realize at the time, well, I wasn't sure, because my homeopath couldn't actually tell me what was happening and what was working. But I did work with her right at the beginning, um, homeopathically, and I now realize that that helped me incredibly emotionally, and that really set me up for the nutritional therapy to work really quickly and really well. Because what I didn't realize was I was actually um, addressing my emotions first. And I was bedridden for 3 days, where I was having this purge, where this stuff was coming up to the surface. I felt like I was purging a whole load of rubbish, like it was unblocking loads of blockages. And what was amazing through this homeopathy is I actually regained my voice, and I found myself being able to say things that I would not, and I was upsetting people. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. Like, like, oh my God, what's happening? But then it was at the same time when I was realizing that it can be a pattern of not being able to express one's truth, express themselves. And I used to, because my partner was at work, I used to do this thing where I was washing up at home and I would sing, because I felt like singing would be very therapeutic for me, and I would sing, and then I would burst into tears. I don't know like why, because it was quite an emotive song. It was a song back from my childhood, and as I was singing it out loud, it was quite an emotional song. It brought me to tears, and I realised like I just felt like I had this sense of getting my voice back, and my expression, and yeah, so I felt like, oh yeah, I've got my voice back. My antibodies halved. And at that time I thought, is it the gluten, or is it like the homeopathy, or maybe it's both? But every 3 months my antibodies were halving. Um, and it came to the point where I found working in a school too stressful. So I just quit, and I was like, I'm going to do my third year. It's going to be an amazing gift to myself. I'm just going to study, nothing else. My mum had passed away and left some money. So I had a bit of money to live off. And I thought, I'm going to give myself this most amazing gift. I'm going to just study, and I'm going to do all the things that bring me joy. I'm going to get all the rest that I want. And I'm going to heal. And I made such an incredible, rapid recovery. It was amazing. And even at that time, I didn't realize exactly everything that I was doing. I was going off my intuition, what was coming from within. And, if I was probably to go over it, it would be fascinating to really analyze it all. But I was buying myself flowers because I thought it was like color therapy or whatever. But really, I was buying myself a gift. It was real like self care. Um, so yeah, so that was my real turning point.
Mm.
And then from then, I found also with setting up a business, I had to set boundaries, and if people didn't turn up to a session, and that was actually where I had started to practice putting down boundaries, and realized that I had to protect myself and to do things for me. Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was really, yeah.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Because I guess the finishing bit to my story was late 30s to through my 40s. I was going through perimenopause. So there were some very confusing signals going on. But I was so deep into, the therapies that I was doing. I did loads of different things. I trained in obviously polarity therapy. Then I became a teacher in polarity therapy. Then I did a whole shamanic thing, and I did a lot of travel to Hawaii, which was a real spiritual journey for me. So over the period of those 10 years, I guess, I was every year I'd go to Hawaii because there was something driving me there. So that what you said about that inner drive, and I think that's it. That's part of the pushing beyond the boundaries thing, but it's also a positive thing because there's something in you that drives you, and you don't know where it comes from. I mean, you could analyze it, but there is this innate thing that is driving you. And the problem is with autoimmune conditions, you go beyond what is that that natural boundary that should hold you back a bit. So I did a lot during that time, a lot of healing, a lot of deep stuff, a lot of spiritual healing as well. Worked with a kahuna out in Hawaii on a personal journey for myself. um, lot of I did a lot of training and a lot of just that my whole life changed basically during that whole time. And then I reached my 50s and I was still I stayed in perimenopause for quite a long time, so I had all these signals in my body, all sorts of things going on which I didn't understand at the time actually, because in those days perimenopause and menopause wasn't spoken about so much as it is nowadays. So I kind of missed that window. My mum didn't really help with that either. But slowly I healed the rift with my mum. I never had a good relationship with mum, but we slowly started to heal. Then my father sadly became ill and he passed away. But I went, so this is the pattern came back because I hadn't been diagnosed yet with Hashimoto's, but the pattern was there. So I went to live with my parents to care for my dad and to help my mum because we didn't know how she was going to cope. So I went back into the lion's den, if you like, back into that environment that didn't support me, back into all of that, and I became the parent to my parents, as I had always been anyway. Took on responsibility, all of that. My father passed, and that day that he passed, he was at home, and I was instrumental in making sure my mum said what she needed to say to him, getting my sister on the phone. She was in Ireland to say what she needed to say to him before. I mean, all of that. It was just very, but I was in operation mode. I wasn't thinking about myself. I was just in operation mode. So my grief came a lot later with that. And then I had to take care of my mum's needs because she was very fragile after my dad died. But then I had to put my foot down because I was realizing I was going right back into the childhood pattern with my mum, the dynamic we had, and she was very controlling in emotionally. And I got to the stage where I had reached exhaustion, and I didn't know why at that time, but I'd reached exhaustion. So I then decided to go to Hawaii for a break. So I said to mum, look, brother's down the road, everything's fine, everything's set up. And it did us the world of good. So that was 2011. That was when, I don't know whether you remember, but out in Hawaii or in Japan, there was a big earthquake and a tsunami, and then the reactor broke up, and then it was kind of, there was a fear of the radiation being in the ocean and in the air and all that. So I ended up staying an extra 2 weeks in Hawaii because we were hit by that, all of that, potential tsunami and everything. So I ended up staying there for 5 or 6 weeks, I think it was. So I came back and mum had sorted herself out. She was standing on her own 2 feet for the first time in her life. So I needed to remove myself from that, in order for her to find her feet. I'd also written a book about my story, which she read, which was very hard for her to read. Um, and so she read my book, and then we were able to discuss it. And she was able to tell me how she was feeling growing up, and she listened to me how I felt growing up. So it was very interesting. So anyway, long story short, back to 2010, my father passed away, and then I had that period in between, before my mum passed away, where life was good. I met my husband. I didn't, because during all of my story, I kept on meeting the wrong kind of men. So that was another thing. Kept on meeting the wrong type. But eventually I met the right man because I was better. I was so much better in myself. I was, life was good. And then my mum, it came to my mum's time. She had cancer, and it was very difficult. And when she passed away, that's when I really crashed because I put all my energy, because I promised her I'd be there when she passed. I put all my energy in taking care of her needs. I really didn't take care of my needs at all. So I went back into the pattern again. And then when my mum passed, I literally had nothing in the tank, like you said earlier, it's that nothing in the tank. So that's when I went on a retreat, discovered I had thyroid problem, and discovered I had Hashimoto's. And then it was that discovery, okay, what do I do? Do I go on medication, which I thought I'd never do, or do I do the holistic way, whatever? As it turned out, I did a combination. I started on medication. I was on, oh, I can't remember it now. And then I discovered a really good homeopath who specialized in Hashimoto's. And together we got myself off medication, and then my thyroid started to work well. Then I worked on the antibodies, and I'm fine. I have lots of energy. I am really conscious of my boundaries because I know that's the pattern. I'm really conscious of my boundaries. I take care of myself as much as I can before other people, which sounds selfish, but it's not, particularly if you're in that other person-centered mode. You have to work hard on that. But, I'm able to express myself now. I would never have done this when I was younger, sitting here chatting like this. Um, Rest is a big priority. I'm in my mid 60s now, so rest is a really big priority with me. I'm obviously through the menopause. So when I feel tired, I take time out. That's a really big lesson for me. Um, and I kind of know who I am. I've kind of reclaimed myself, but I've done a lot of self-healing. I've done a lot of depth, ancestral healing, everything like that. I've done so much nutrition, homeopathy, you know, making sure that the exercises that I do, or that I don't exhaust myself. So walking, swimming, things like that, not going and doing a hit session or something that will totally exhaust me. I can't cope with that. That's not who I am. So it's taken me a long time, but I absolutely know you can heal things. And my PCOS, by the way, that was healed in my 40s. I healed, that was healed in my 40s. So, but I know it's very much linked to thyroid problems. There is a link there. So, but it all comes down to, okay, can slip back into my pattern if I'm not careful. But I've kind of at that point where there's too much that I know and understand about myself now that I very rarely do that, you know. I very rarely do that. And if I do, I recognize it and I stop and I go back to my routine that supports me. So yeah. So I guess the key learning for me, the healing reversal for me was recognizing I needed rest, honoring my boundaries, expressing my true thoughts and feelings and not hiding away from that. Um, and that enabled me to reclaim who I was, and I have a lot of support around me, when I need it. And I don't have to take on all responsibility for everybody and everything. So that was it. And the key thing is listening to my body. That was the key thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to say also quickly, because I saw you made I think it was on Instagram actually, and you mentioned how PCOS, the emotional roots of that was being in a very masculine environment, and it made me
Yes.
think back to when you were in the military.
Yeah.
Maybe you being in the military was that being in that trying to prove yourself in that masculine environment.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was just going to say that, yeah, I mean, I don't think I've done as much work as you, and I probably still need to do a bit more work. But for me, I have started to realize also things like rest. So, for example, I have one child, and I battled with the decision of whether to have another. And really deep inside me, it's like it's just too much for me. It's just too much stress. It's too much. I'm really happy with one.
Yes.
And I need my sleep. I hate my sleep being interrupted. I'm just I don't like rushing around. I love my peaceful mornings. there's certain things that I just think I think it's more unconscious. For me, it has been like I've just realised that no, I don't want to do that, and it's that practice of setting those boundaries,
Mm.
And if someone says, do you want to come into London for this? And I'm just like, you know what, actually, I don't. It's just practicing saying no, making sure I get the rest, not going into overdrive, which I
Mm.
still sometimes, I'm still in that pattern where I'm trying to work on, meeting other people's expectations. I'm still working on that. Um, but yes, I have reclaimed my identity, and I try to express my truth as well. Although I still have some people saying you can't just say everything that you think, and you can't go around doing, but I have this deep innate need to be sort of heard.
Mm.
I feel like I want to be heard and to contribute my thing, but it's still because I'm not used to having my voice. I feel like I need to tame it and curate it and, say things in the right way, rather than just like it all pouring out of me. So working on that. But yes, what was I going to say? Yeah, just listening to my body. I feel like I'm quite, getting good at that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just realize. Yeah, it's just having this realization now. Ever since I've met you, it's just realizing how important the emotional piece is.
Mm.
So, I mean, nutrition and lifestyle and environment, they can do so much, but it really is there to rebalance the body
Mm.
and the mind.
Mm.
But I've come to accept and realize that it doesn't really touch the emotions.
Mm.
You have to change your mind and your
Mm.
emotions, and then it filters back down again. And that's why I feel so passionate, about bringing it into thyroid energy essentials and to bring it, into my work, even though it's not my expertise.
Mm.
Because some people will make progress with the diet and lifestyle, but they'll sort of hit a wall. And I've realized that if someone's sort of doing all the right things but not making the progress, then there is this other piece that needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It,
if you just yeah, sorry,
yeah.
if you
So it's interesting you say that because um, when I work with people and working through my healing journey as well, it's easy to say you've got to sort out your emotions, but the isn't it? But the emotions are the thing that are one of the most difficult things to sort out because they are the feeling state in your body. So the way that I look at healing emotions, for example, is you need some kind of body. That's why polarity therapy is so good because you need some kind of hands-on body therapy that can hold the energy body where the emotion is being held. Okay,
Mhm.
because sometimes we can mentally think, yeah, that's why I'm feeling it like that, but the emotion's still there. So you need some kind of support to move that energy in the body, okay? Some kind of physical body that has a consciousness, a physical therapy that has a consciousness about it that can do that. Um, and also, it's about looking your ancestry as well, because very often we carry the patterns of our parents, and I can see very clearly in my lineage through my mother in particular and my father, the patterns that I have inherited and have been triggered by my life experiences and what's happened to me in my life. And lots of trauma was in my life, and lots of trauma was in my mum's life as well. So it's about also um, addressing that too. It's about going through the process where you can release that tie to the past. So, because we're being anchored to the past experiences. And for women, don't forget, we've been suppressed for millennia. So we hold that in our DNA as well. And of course, not everybody's suffers in the way some people suffer. It's just that we are predisposed to suffer or be triggered by our environment or experiences because we've got that in our DNA, and some people aren't. So everybody's different at the end of the day. But it's important to be able to release and address those stronger ties that can anchor that particular story, that pattern within
Mhm.
us. So yeah, it's very, very important to do that. And
Yeah.
and just really getting to know what certain situations trigger certain feelings in you, when do you feel unsafe? what environments do you feel unsafe in? Which people do you feel unsafe with? And really listening, you're right, listening to the body, listening to how you're feeling. So it's not separating from things, but it's standing outside of the box, observing yourself in certain situations and recognizing that, rather than just what we do is immerse ourselves and be in this kind of sea of emotions that we don't understand why we're feeling that is because obviously Hashimoto's or autoimmune conditions means that we very often absorb other people's energies. We're over empathetic. And that's when you have to learn to step outside of a situation and observe yourself, only yourself, to learn how to do that. So, yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, yeah, thank you so much, Jane. I mean, I could talk about this all day and I could probably bring out a million examples and I could talk about this all day, but I realise that you need to get on. So it was such a fascinating and wonderful chat, and I really hope that anyone watching this can get something from this. And that maybe you can start to sort of maybe draw a timeline and to think about the things that have happened, and start to just go back and just start looking back, really. Um, but yeah, otherwise, yeah, I don't know whether whether we want to do it in another video or whether you want to say a little bit about, what you do and what you can help with, and if anybody wants to reach out and get in touch with you, do you want to just do a little summary of that? And
why not?
yeah,
So yeah, yeah, I work with people individually, both in person in the UK and online as well. So I treat quite a few people around the world really, and I meet you where you are. So there's no pressure. All right. I hope I hold a safe space. I've been told I do for people to really connect to what's going on within them. And there are various techniques that I use, both shamanically and with polarity as well, where we do certain things that enable you to touch into that part of you that perhaps you find really difficult to touch into for whatever reason. So it's all about activating the energy that's already within you and that's got stuck basically. Um, so yes, you can work with me online or in person. I am working towards putting some more of my stuff online, etc. So that's something that's a project I'm working on at the moment because I have a lot of information, I have a lot of knowledge. So I want to be able to share that. So that's going to be in a different format, but that's coming. Um, yeah, so my website is called hinalight.co.uk and my email address is jane@hinalight.co.uk. And you can get in touch with me through that. But thank you very much, Sarah, for sharing as well, because
yeah.
it's a big thing, isn't it?
It is, because actually, when you talked about carrying that shame or that thing within you that nobody else is witnessing, I was so ashamed of my family, and the childhood that I'd had. I
Mm.
was too ashamed to tell anybody, and so that was another thing that I really carried, within me. And I must carry on without it and deal with it and hold it. And only just now I'm starting to really just be quite honest and open about the things that I've gone through.
Yeah.
I feel quite misunderstood by some of my friends. I don't think they really understand me. But I still don't feel ready to tell them, yeah,
Yes.
unless they watch this video. But
Yeah.
it's more new people that I meet. I'm more comfortable with just being quite
Yeah.
honest and open about,
Yeah.
my situation. So it's, I'm in my early 40s, so I'm still a work in progress myself. And I've reversed my antibodies down to 44, found a place of remission where I felt pretty good every day. But you've sparked this curiosity in me to think, well, actually, could I bring them down to zero? Is there still something there? Like
Mm.
maybe there's still some work to do. And
Mm.
um, you know, I'm I'm still feel like I have to maintain and work on things. So
Mm.
sometimes I wonder, or maybe there's still a piece of the puzzle that I need to carry on working on.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, but I also think that as you say that, I'm inside me, I'm thinking there's no pressure. There's no pressure, you know. It's about how you feel at the end of the day. And if you've got energy, if you're feeling happy, if you're feeling good, that's the most important thing. So because we can get, as I did, you get so engrossed in your healing process that you forget actually, how do I really feel? I'm actually feel, and it's an example. It's like, actually, I feel life's pretty good. I'm doing okay. And sometimes you need some breathing space to be just that, rather than
Mm,
have to keep thinking, okay, right, I need to do this now. But you're right. I think anything's possible with the right chemistry, with the right set of circumstances and all. I do think anything's possible.
mm,
But also, I think part of the healing journey is about having space to integrate and breathe through it as well. And because part of the issue is the pushing, is the ooh, isn't it? And it's
yeah.
like, okay, let me just breathe for a moment. And it might be 5 minutes, it might be 5 days, it might be 5 months or 5 weeks, but just allowing for things to then flow again. And that very often gets you to where you need to be, just injecting that pause, that space.
Because I'm still on thyroid medication and I didn't really see, I don't see that as failure or anything like that, and I feel
Not true.
well.
Yeah.
So part of me is inspired to think, oh, well, could I get off the medication like Jane does? But
Mm.
I also just want to leave this with anyone who's watching, is that, that medication can give you that support, and that time to actually breathe and, take reflect, and it gives you that ability to keep going, and to give you that time essentially to work out what you need to do, and
Yeah.
how to move on. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed the chat. Maybe we can do some other videos in the future. But otherwise, for now, I think that's a great introduction for anyone watching, whether that's on YouTube or in my course. So yeah, thank you, and love to hear what anyone thinks of that. But otherwise, we're going to leave it there, and hopefully, we'll come back another day with some more chat. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jane.